everyone, and welcome back to the third episode of our YouTube virtual masterclasses. We're talking about production, and as you know, this is one of a series of videos that we're making to help you guys improve the production quality of your videos and improve your channels pretty much. If you haven't watched the other two episodes, so the previous two episodes, you can go back and check the link on the video description, or you can go to the homepage of the YouTube Creator Academy channel, subscribe, and yeah, watch the previous two episodes. So we're gonna go live again next week, and just to give you a quick overview of who we are, if you haven't watched our episodes previously, my name is Marco, and I am a YouTube partner manager here in London, looking after UK and Irish creators, and I am joined by Michelle, who's a director of photography, and for the past 2 weeks she's been helping all of you guys to achieve tremendous results with your video production. So just to give a quick summary of what we talked before, so we talked about camera and sound in the first episode, and we talked about lighting in the previous episode, and today's session is all about cinematography.
Yeah, that's right. So I see that you're getting involved there.
Yeah,
next time I'm going to give you some homework.
Juggle with,
have you been checking your lighting? But yeah, so yeah, as Marco said, we've been covering initially the basics of camera work. Last week we talked about lighting, and I set you some homework, so I hope that you guys practiced your lighting with whatever you got in the house. This week we're getting more involved in what cinematography is all about. Now, I'm assuming a lot of you guys, content creators, are directing as well as directing the photography, which is essentially what cinematography is all about. It's all about what you see in the frame. Now, in film, there are lots of different roles that kind of blend into one another. So your director of photography generally is involved with setting up the look of a shot. You'll be framing the shot. You'll be helping the director choose what kind of stylistic look you wanna give to your visuals. And it's it's the whole artistry of creating really beautiful shots, or really weird shots if that's what you're into. So today we're just going to look at a few different styles. I'm going to sort of have a little play around with the lights. We are a bit limited in terms of space here, but I'll be talking you through a lot of examples. And as always, in the past 2 weeks and this week as well, anything that we do talk about, if I talk about links, there are going to be links in the description underneath the video, so you can come back after the live session, watch the videos again, go through the links, and you'll be able to directly see what we're talking about when we refer to examples.
Yeah. And as always, you can ask your questions in the comments below. Yeah. And Michelle tonight
ask me any
will answer.
questions, from the last sessions and also from this session. Hopefully, you'll want to engage a little bit more in the world of cinematography and what that's all about. So to begin with, I guess I should just introduce cinematography as a concept. So cinematography, it sounds very similar to photography. It comes from the same vein of artistry. Essentially, it's photography for the cinema. So you sometimes get people called directors of photography, and what you're basically doing in that role is styling a shot. So whether that's choosing the right lens, getting the right depth of field, choosing the lights, on a big set you're going to be working with a big team of people, but I know a lot of you guys are working in smaller groups or on your own, so this session is really designed to give you the basics of how you can really ratchet your cinematography game up to the next level and not, go to a massive expense to do that. So we'll probably talk about a few different styles, filmic styles, because I know in the past week session I talked a lot about lighting to give you a really sort of clean ground to begin with, so that you can take just a very sort of fresh look into post and work with that in the edit. Today we're going to be looking at how a cinematographer might scope the change in terms of lighting and styling of a film on set, on the day of the shoot, and something that you can incorporate into your own videos. I know last week, Marco, you mentioned coming up with your own brand, your own style, and that's something that you can really do through cinematography. Whatever you're shooting on, we've got video cameras, we've got your DSLRs, we've got GoPros as well. We're really sort of bringing all the cameras into the mix today, so hopefully we'll be touching on something that is relevant to you, whether you're just starting out, whether you've been shooting for a while. Hopefully this will be interesting and engaging in terms terms
later
of...
this evening, we'll also take a few examples of from like popular YouTubers out there.
Yeah, we
and
will.
looking at the kind of recreating that style and that look.
Yeah. I know a lot of you guys have talked about the questions for the last couple of weeks. How can you emulate the styles of some of your favourite vloggers and YouTubers? And that is something that we'll be kind of giving you a step-by-step guide. We'll be analysing how some of the more popular content creators shape their look and how you can do that as well, whether you've got like really expensive lights or whether you're just working with whatever you've got in the house. So hopefully this will be a really good intro session to shaping your style a little bit more than just your standard three-point lighting.
So we're getting more advanced.
Yeah, exactly. Today. But everything does begin with that three-point lighting set, and having said that, should we move over to the studio?
Let's go.
All right, cool. Okay.
Our model is still here. Hi.
Yes, our model has been here for many weeks. Not feeding him. But yeah, we are just having the one light on at the minute, so I can just show you the difference between three-point lighting, just as a quick refresher from what we went over last week. So this is our key light. Hopefully you remember that. It's the main light. That's why we call it the key. It's generally quite a hard light. And if we don't have any of the other lights turned on, I've even turned off the lamp, we're just getting kind of this very shadowed look on one side. We've got a lot of directional light, and then we're just falling off into shadow. That's quite a heavy stylistic look. So it's very contrasty. It's something that's going to give a really sort of dynamic shape, but it's something that's, it's very applicable to the right situation. This kind of look, you're going to really use it for things like noir shooting, you're going to use it for things like thriller, and you're just going to keep shaping your light, building on that. So if we just start to bring in the other three lights, I'm going to then take them away and see what that does. So the next light we've got is our fill light. So as you can see, that one we had on the dimmer, it's just a soft light. I'm going to just bring that up, fill out those shadows, and as you can see, that just gives us a really nice spread of light across the face. And once again, it's just taking off any of that glare, any of the long shadows that we don't want. Marco, can I just get you to put the backlight on, that dado?
Yep. And
I'll do it.
Sorry.
That's okay.
How do I do it?
Nah. So, it's just that.
Oh, there you go.
Well, there we go.
Sorry.
So that's probably quite strong. If you just turn that down a little bit, that's going to be our backlight as before. I'll just tell you when. So just bring that level down a little bit. Yeah, okay, that's fine. We'll leave it at that. So yeah, this is the three-point lighting set that we began with last week. We've got your back, your key, and your fill. And as before, that is your initial construct that you're going to build on to shape your own style with your lighting. Now, you're going to just see what happens if I take some of these lights out, and we'll demonstrate what that does to the image, how cinematographers might use that to create their own unique look, and how it might serve you well if you're shooting a genre or a style. So genre just basically means a different style, like rom-com, noir, that kind of thing. This is what we're going to do using lighting, just change the shape. So first of all, now we've got all three lights on, I'm going to lose the key light. Normally, I wouldn't advise that, but it is a stylistic decision. Taking that out, as you can see, two lights. You've got your backlight and you've just got a soft fill light. It gives you quite a lot of contrast. It looks kind of moody, somber, particularly in this room. Obviously, we've got black curtains all the way around. We've created this dark atmosphere. Now, I mentioned in the first week session a very little bit about the rule of thirds when you're composing your shot. As you can see here, our actor's eyes aren't quite on the right line. Now, I've set a grid onto this camera so that you can see where an actor's eyes should fall. Framing is, besides lighting, one of the most important things that a cinematographer can do to shape a shot. And this is what we're going to see when we move this. So you really want to have your eye line just on that top third when you're setting up a shot. It's just going to keep a nice even look to your shot. It's going to be conversational style. It doesn't create some kind of atmosphere. It's just a really nice balanced way to present a person on camera. Now, as you can see, it's a bit dark. We're going to bring that other light back up, and we're just going to lose that backlight. So, Marco, if you can just lose that backlight for me.
There you go.
So as you can see in this example, we've got no backlight, we've not even got the lamp on, we've just got a really flat looking image. Now this is the kind of image that you really don't want, but some people do use this as an effect. I've seen it used in a few of the vloggers in the YouTube community, where you just have a really strong front light and then you've got the light falling off into a nice vignette. And it can be quite a cool look for a spotlight if you are wanting to really highlight something, particularly if you've got a performance, if you're a musician, then maybe you do want to do this kind of spotlit look. And what it does, having a key and a fill, is it just stops you getting too much of shadow on one side of the face, as you can see if I just lose this one. Now again, this is really a contrasty look. It's a noir kind of look. It's a very dark look. It's the kind of look that's going to give you the impression that you're doing something that's a bit spooky, a bit of a thriller. It's the kind of thing that might work if you're into that kind of filmmaking. Now, I have set up another lighting setup for us today. So this one, I'm going to keep a little bit of fill, just a tiny bit to bring that in, and then I'm going to swap out this key light for a hard spotlight, and I'm going to show you kind of an interrogation look. So if we just lose this, Marco, can I get you to pop that backlight on? All right, so what we've done here, we've still got a backlight that's just giving us that really nice haloing effect that I talked about in last week's session, where you've got that edge light that just picks out our subject from the background. And then we've got a really harsh spotlight coming in. And you do have, as you can see, the light falls across the space and creates a shadow here. And what that ends up giving you is a real sort of interrogative look. If you're in short films, if you're making something with that kind of scene where you want somebody to really pop, then you might want to look at investing in something like a spotlight. And there are different ways that you can do that beyond actually investing in what we've got, these dado lights. Just even, you've seen films where you've got a table there, you've got your bad guy and your good guy, and then there's a big desk lamp shining in the main guy's eyes. Just do that at home, practice with it. It's actually a technique that works really well. So what we're going to do is look beyond lighting at other ways that you can enhance your cinematography, because although lighting is really important, cinematography is about everything that you're going to see on screen. It's about everything that falls within that frame. So we've got this zoom lens on here. I've got it set to about 50mm. If I go a bit wider, then you're going to see suddenly we've got this shot where our actor's eyes are no longer on that third. You want to just bring that down, so you bring that back. But now, as you can see, our actor, he's kind of low in the frame. Now, framing choice really affects how an audience perceives a character. For example, traditionally in Western film, a good guy would run the same direction that you would read, so left to right. You got your good character going left to right, you know he's good, your mind is telling you, even though you're not quite figuring out why. It's all subconscious. Cinematographers do that all the time. They pick up on those cues and they work out how you can sort of lend credence to the fact that one guy's a hero, one guy's a bad guy. So in this frame, I'm coming from the top, so it gives our actor kind of a defensive position. He's small in the frame, he's like, don't hurt me. That's the kind of way, see, he's scared already. That's the kind of way that you're going to frame up your actors if you're trying to give a particular look by choosing tripod height. Now, we've not really talked about anything to do with tripods and grip equipment yet, and we will be touching on that in next week's session, Production on a Shoestring. So if you really want to know about the tools of the trade, definitely tune in next week. But this is just one of the things that tripods are useful for. I mean, I know that you can just stick your camera on a surface, so long as it's sort of level and you've got your shot rolling, that's fine. But tripods are really good for being able to give you that extra element of control over your shot. You're going to be able to position your actors in a way that really brings out a shot. Now, when you've got your wide lens on, you can play around with perspective. In the very first lesson, if you remember those weeks back, I talked a little bit about depth of field and how a wide lens has less depth of field. Now, that's because a wide lens has more things in the shot that are closer to the sensor. They're all in the same plane of field. Now, what I want our actor to do is, if you could stand up for me and just come a bit closer to the lens. Okay, so as you can see in this shot, I've got my actor nice and close to the lens, and you can also see the background is still fairly sharp. It's because it's that wide lens, it doesn't have that nice depth of field. This is the kind of shot that you'd want if you're going for kind of a documentary aesthetic, if you're not really bothered too much about creating that soft, romantic depth of field in the background. This kind of shot is perfect for that. If you're shooting a group of people, you're going to want a wide lens anyway. As you can see, I've got my tripod now pointing up. Our actor's dominant in the frame. That's another framing choice that's going to change how your audience reacts to your actor. So if you've got this bad guy, he's coming for the good guy, you're probably going to frame him like this. It's also known as a hero shot. You see it a lot in Michael Bay movies. They get up, the camera swirls around them, wow, pretty big. And that's how they do it. It's just one of those framing choices that lets the guy be elevated in the frame. You can sit back down for me now. Thank you very much. Now at the other end of the scale, you've got long lens. Now this is great, I've got a zoom on so I can show you without having to change the lens. Basically with a zoom, as before, you're going to be able to get closer to your subject and you're going to have a more defocused background. Now I am trying to maintain that rule of thirds where the eye is on the top third. You can cut off a bit of the top of the head. If you're framing a really tight close-up, what you don't want to do is cut off chin. You always want to think as a cinematographer, what is the most flattering shot? And it's definitely to lose a bit of the top of the head. If you lose a bit of the chin, you end up having an actor that's got no neck. It's quite a strange look, especially on ladies, it's not very flattering. So it's something, if you're going for an extreme close-up, you really want to either go all the way into just the eyes or just come out gently so you can just see a little bit of head missing. That's like a really nicely framed shot there. We still got that interrogation lighting on, so it's looking a bit strange. Let's pop the other lighting back on. So I'll lose that. Go back in with our key. And as you can see, that's now nice soft lighting. I'm going to probably just up the fill a little bit there because we've come a bit closer. The other thing to know about lenses, the longer your lens is, the darker it's probably going to be. You notice there's a lot with zoom lenses, particularly things like the Canon 70 to 200. It is a 2.8 lens all the way through if you've got the L series lens, but it does sort of get darker the longer you go. That's because there's more elements inside of that lens. So if you imagine a lens and we cut it in half, you're going to see bits of glass all the way through, just discs. All of those are called lens elements, and the more that you've got, the darker your image is going to be. It's why prime lenses are generally used if you really want a lot of depth of field, a really nice shallow look. We'll probably change lens actually, Marco. If you could pass me the 85mm, I'm just going to demonstrate the difference. So an 85 is a prime lens. I think I might have talked about it a little bit in the first session. And basically thank you very much.
Cheers.
Basically what that does, it's less glass, it tends to be a really nice glass element, it lets a lot more light in, it's got a really wide aperture. I mean, if you have a look at one of these, you can really see all the way through it. When that aperture's wide open, you're really going to be able to see that there's loads of light able to come into that. Now, I'm going to just change the lens on this. I'm going to switch it off first, which is also good practice. And hopefully you'll be able to see a similar size shot to that previous one, but you'll be able to see the way that we can get a lot more light in. It's going to look a lot brighter, and I'll probably have to turn that fill light back down to where it was. Can I just pass you that, Marco? Thank you very much. So, as you can see, camera resets when you do that all the way back down to 1.2, which is really wide open. If you're shooting at 1.2, first of all, you've got amazing lenses, and I'm very jealous. But second of all, you really want to make sure your image is sharp, because you want to be shooting HD and you want to be delivering in HD, and people are going to know if your image is a little bit soft. So as you can see, that's, even though I've stopped it to f4, it's still a brighter look. It's a prime lens. The glass is really high quality. It's a clean look, and that's what you really want to use primes for. You want to use them to be able to get all that light in, have a very shallow depth of field. We'll probably look at a few examples of that in a little while. I've got a few that I want to bring up, but we'll go back, sit down for that. So on this, I did mention I don't really like to have the shutter speed raised, but if I just raise it to show you what you can do with this lens. So I'll put my shutter speed up there, and then open up that lens, and as you can see, that lamp in the background really becomes just a blur. It's almost unable to, you know, distinguish what it originally was. I will pop that back on. So you've just got that soft glow, and that is really the beauty of the prime lens. It's about choosing the right lens for your shot. So if you're shooting something, like I said, something gritty, urban, sort of documentary style, you don't need this depth of field. People aren't going to really look for that. If you've got a camcorder, great. Often you're not able to control those kinds of lens decisions with a camcorder, but you can control things like lighting to shape your image. But when you're shooting with something like a DSLR, or for example in this case we've got C300s, you're able to control the light that hits the sensor, you're able to open up your lens and really have a wide aperture, and you're able to craft this kind of depth of field that really gives you that cinematic look. And hopefully you can really see that on this 85. Just zoom in there and check that's sharp. Yeah, cool. So again, cinematographers, they are thinking about the different ways that you can control a style of a film. And we talked about a few genres. So for example, noir, we've looked at the ways that we can create that kind of silhouette look, that half shaded look. Now we're just going to have a look just to show you what it looks like with just the backlight on. It probably look a bit strange, but this is it. I'll keep that lamp on just so you can see the defined outline. Now, this is us just completely taking that fill out. You're still getting some ambient light. Obviously, we are in a studio location. If you replicate this at home with just a backlight, you're going to see, you're just going to get that nice sort of halo effect. Now, I think that's not quite hitting the head where I want it to. I'm going to adjust it. If you remember from last week, I did talk about tungsten lights and how hot they burn. So I am going to use a glove for this because I do want to take my own advice. Now, backlighting can be used for a cinematic effect. It's kind of, I mean, I'd probably use it mostly for bad guys. But you can also just use it if your character's in a dark place. If you're making a short film and your character is experiencing emotions, you're going to go for a more dark and stylized tone. And it's really fun to just play around with these looks. Now, as you can see, I've just got this backlight that's gliding in off the back of the head there. It's just shooting across the face. It's giving you that really defined, hard look. We've lost a bit of the lights in the studio, so you can really see that. At the moment, I've still got that lamp there, which I probably would just keep, to be honest, to give you that real sense of depth. Obviously, I'll show you what it looks like without that. And you really end up with a flat image. It's a pretty cool image, I'll be honest. It does look pretty cool, but it's very flat. You've got just that nice back, just hitting, giving you a little bit of a side light, but you've lost that sense of depth that having that light in the background really brings out. So this goes back to what I talked about a little bit last week with lighting. If you are setting up a shot, particularly if you've got a nice long space to play with, then you want to put things in the background that really demonstrate your depth of field. So things like a lamp, things like candlesticks, anything like that is really going to work. It's just going to bring out that sense that something else is going on in this shot, that you've really thought about it. Now, cinematographers generally work really closely with an art department, different departments that are going to bring more to your shot. Now, I can't really show you on this lens because it's a bit close, but we have some lovely globe in the background, just there, and our lamp. So stuff like that in your shot, it's just another way that you can enhance the fact that you have thought about your composition, you have thought about your lighting. I don't know if I would have an inflatable globe in my shot, but it's something that we've done just to demonstrate that we can show you different depths of field. Now I'm going to pop these lights back on because it's looking a bit dark. Okay. So first of all, just bringing that fill light back up, and you can see again it's a really subdued look just with two lights. I did talk last week about this. Although your staple of cinematography is your three-point lighting, you don't have to stick with it. I mean, for example, quite a common lighting setup these days in interview settings or in corporates, it's just two LED panels, and as LEDs are my recommended light if you are on a budget, you know, just get a couple of stands and experiment with them. This kind of lighting, it's very soft, it's very flattering. You don't have that harsh key coming in. You do still have a little bit of shadow, but the light wraps around the face in that really nice, soft, diffused way. Let's just add that key back again and you'll see the difference. See, now my shot is probably slightly overexposed. Oh, it's actually about dead on I'll give myself a high five for that one. But yeah, it's looking pretty nice. You've got a nice even light. You've got that ping in the eyes that I was talking about. This is more of what I would call a classic vlogger kind of look. You've got an even light. You've got no fall off. There's only a minimum of shadow, and you've got depth in the background. It's a really nicely composed shot, and that's the kind of thing that you really want to be looking at as a cinematographer or as somebody that's really starting to learn about framing. You want to just be playing with those kinds of things. Now, I did want to show you a fisheye lens, because that's another way that you can manipulate your shot. So if I could just get that, Marco.
Coming. There
Cool. Now, we've talked about primes and we've talked about zooms. This is obviously another one of the prime lenses. This is the Canon fisheye. We have talked a lot about Canon equipment in this series so far, so I will mention other lens brands that you can get. I know there's a Rokinon or a Samyang also make a fisheye lens, and it depends on your sensor how much of a great image you're going to get out of that. This one I think is designed for the Canon DSLR range, so you should get a pretty good image even on a full frame sensor, which is another thing we'll talk about. As a cinematographer, you also want to talk about choosing the right camera for the job. And if you are establishing your own visual style, choosing a camera that's going to stick with you and work in a different situation depending on what you want to do is again a really important distinction. Okay, now I believe that this fisheye, yeah, okay, there we go. So it's a super wide lens. It's going to give you a slight curve at the edge. And I'm just going to sharpen that up so you can have a look. We'll show you the difference between a fisheye on a wide shot and a fisheye when we bring our actor close to us. Marco, can I just get you to take that lens? I won't throw it. Thanks very much. Okay, cool. So this is a fisheye, and it basically gives you an almost spherical field of view. So when you look at the front of the lens, you can see that it curves. And what that means is it's just curving to encapsulate everything that's in front of the lens. So we can really, if we tilt down here, see basically our entire actor, which is, you know, not something that you would normally be able to do with just a standard wide lens. Now, I'm going to just get you to take a step forward, and you'll begin to see what the fisheye does when you get close to the lens. If you just put your hand out for me in front of the lens. Cool. So as you can see, a fisheye kind of distorts things that are brought close to it. That spherical sense just gives you a real width to anything that's in front of the lens. So as you can see, our actor's hand looks massive here, and he looks really far away, like he's got massively long arms. It's a really cool lens for specialized effects. It used to be used all the time in skate videos in the 90s. It was also used in a lot of early rap videos, if you're into that, and I know I am. So this is the kind of look that you really want to go for if you're trying to create something unusual, a bit unnerving, something that the human eye doesn't really see. This isn't the way that we would normally compute lights. I mean, you can even see the sides of these lights coming in there. You can see the backlight. You can see our edge light. It's, you know, a really massively weird lens, and it's a very distinctive look. If you're going to go with it, then you want to stick with it. Thank you very much. You can have a sit down. So those are the different ways that lenses and lighting can affect your shot as a cinematographer. Obviously, we talked in the first episode in the series about aperture and ISO and the ways in which white balance can affect your shot. We're just going to talk a little bit, I'll probably swap lens again. Anything's good, surprise me. But we'll talk a bit about how white balance can change your shot as a stylistic choice. Now, Marco is bringing me a nifty 50, one of my favorite lenses. Again, it's going to give you that nice mid shot. This camera, it's got the similar size crop on the sensor to what you would have in your 60D or your 70D or your 7D. It's not the same sensor size as a 5D, which is a full frame sensor. It's going to give you much more field of view with a 50. But this is going to give you a nice mid, and we'll demonstrate that now when I turn this back on. I'll pass you this, thank you very much.
Okay.
All right, so coming down. This lens, mid-shot, get that nice and sharp, close that down. Okay, so as you can see, we talked last lesson and also in the first week briefly about white balance. Now, as a cinematographer, I advised you to try and keep everything as clean as you can, consistent lighting across the board, but there are ways that you can manipulate that. So we've got some green gel. I'm just going to get you, Marco, to try and cover some of the light for me with that. It might be better actually if I can get you to put it on this spotlight. So I'll just pop that on. Just hold it in front. Just be careful because it does get hot. You don't want it to melt. But as you can see, that kind of just gives our actor a slightly green tinge to his look. It's something that you might use if you're trying to shoot something a bit spooky, a bit weird and a bit creative. If you can see on the wide shot, it's really bouncing green onto the floor. It's, you know, a kind of filter that's not really going to be used in everyday use, but it's an interesting look. Thanks very much, Marco. Get rid of that. It's a bit too bright. Now you can, I mentioned before, change your white balance based on the kind of shot you're looking for. We talked very briefly earlier on about genre. So here I'm just increasing the warmth of my shot by manipulating the white balance. Now normally, and I stand by what I said last week, I would do that in post, because once you've made these alterations to your shot, it's a lot harder to change. If you decide, you know what, I thought it was going to look cool, but I don't like it so much, it's much harder to fix that in post. But there are occasions where you're going to want it. If you've been shooting, for example, outside, and you've got that nice golden hour look and you want to carry that in and have a consistent tone across the look of your film, you can manipulate your white balance to reflect that. I'll just show you what happens if we go the other way as well. So this is dialing back down even more. Now you've got a very cold shot, you've got a blue actor, it's a stylistic decision. Again, it's not really something that I would do for just an average vlog, but it's something that you can really play around with, and you know, I would encourage you to do that. As with last week, there is going to be a little bit of homework this week. I'm going to want you to try out some different techniques. So if you do have more than one lens, try out your different lenses, try out your different lights. All of that is really important to just learning about the craft of cinematography. And again, just set up your 3-point lighting and take things out. Just try and change the effect that you're going to get by losing one light. See what you get when you get that edge shadow. I'm just going to set that back to a nice even white balance. That looks pretty good to me. All right, so we do want to talk about some specific examples and ways that you can replicate that. If you would like to join me on the sofa, Marco. Cool.
So yeah, so we were talking earlier that we want to take a few examples from like famous popular YouTubers and try and recreate that look.
Okay.
So do we want to try to start actually with Jack's Gap?
Yeah. Okay. So Jack's Gap.
Famous vlogger.
They are one of the ways in which he tends to light his scenes is with a very much a front light. So when you're using a front light, you're going to get that fall off look that I mentioned earlier when I was demonstrating the lights. You're going to get that nice shine in the eyes, but you're also just going to get the background sort of tailing off. One thing that Jack's Gap does a lot is use a lot of depth of field, which, as we've talked about since session 1, is so important for developing your cinematic look. So just as a refresher, in case you guys are tuning in late or if you forgot since the first session, depth of field is achieved by controlling your f-stop. So if you've got a nice wide aperture, a low f-stop number, you're going to get a lot of light in, and that's going to create a big depth of field. So it's shallow. You're going to have, this would be out of focus, we would be in focus if you're using that kind of style. Okay. Again, I mentioned last week that I tend not to shoot at a higher f-stop than 5.6. After that, things do get a bit flat. Obviously, if you are outside and you don't have access to ND filters and it is a very bright day, you probably will need to have your shutter quite high, you know, a shutter speed high, take your f-stop high as well, just stop that light coming and overexposing your image. But Jack's Gap is, you know, particularly fond of having that nice shallow depth of field, and it just gives you more of a cinematic look, and it just gives his videos more of a kind of high production value that's really achieved through that combination of wide open aperture and a nice frontal light that just gives you a soft fall off.
Yeah, and by the way, in the video descriptions you find the links to some of these videos.
Yeah, I
so
mean,
you get an idea.
we'll have links to all of the examples that we talk about, but we really want you to bring your own examples as well and engage with me in the comments. So if there's a video that you're like, oh, you know, I wonder how they do that, I'd really like to replicate that lighting style, you know, please do log on and ask about it, and hopefully we'll get back to you on that, because it is something that we're really interested in, the styles that you appreciate in cinematography and the ways in which you're admiring other users and how we can teach you about that. So it's definitely something that we're interested in hearing about, your feedback.
Great.
So
we've been talking about beauty vloggers.
Yes, we've talked about beauty vloggers a lot, yeah.
And so we have a look that we want to recreate. She's Tanya Burr.
Yes, Tanya Burr. Okay. Well,
how did you recreate that style?
essentially, we talked a lot about sunlight last week, and how sunlight is quite a strong source of light, and if you are going to use it, you need quite a lot of frontal light. What Tanya Burr does,
window on the
yeah,
back
she tends
normally,
to
right?
set up her frames with the window behind her, which is quite a risky choice actually. It's quite a strong source of light to come in, but she does also have like quite a good garden, I would say. There's a lot in there that's kind of diffusing the light. If you're filming quite high up and it's the middle of the day, say you live on the 3rd floor of a building, you are going to have a lot more strong light, but I would suggest she's probably on the lower floor there because that light isn't so strong, it's not so powerful. In the old days, beauty was shot with Vaseline on the lens, which basically they would do to just soften up the image a lot more. So, I mean, I would never recommend putting Vaseline on your lenses, but it's something that you can do through various effects. You can get lens filters. We talked about ND filters that can screw onto the front of your lens. You can also get lenses that replicate those effects, beauty lenses that just soften up the look of the shot. I mean, I don't think that's what she's doing, but it's an option. If you really want to craft your own style and play around with it, then you can do that. Again, she's got a really good eye light, which is something I'm going to just talk about, you know, again and again. It's so key. If you don't have that spark in your eyes, you just can't connect with your viewers. And obviously these videos are about improving your production values and getting you to engage with your own audience and building up fans. And you know, hopefully this is a course that's designed to help you do that. And you know, the main way you're going to be able to do that is by achieving that communication. It's all about eye contact. Even through the video camera, you can achieve that as long as you've got that good spark in your eyes, and she's really good at that. She's got nice lighting. It's very soft. As I said last week, the lighting wraps around the face. It's not harsh. You've not got shadows. I would suggest that she's probably lighting from both sides, but it could be just a soft light on the top. But it's a nice light that falls off, and it just gives you that nice even tone without any shine or anything nasty like that. Who else shall we discuss?
That's a nice look. We were also looking at Phil DeFranco, so other blogger.
Yeah, well, see, Phil DeFranco is an interesting one because for my taste, I would say that he could do with a little bit more lighting.
Oh, really?
But I think that his style, it kind of suits the way that you know, he shoots. But from what I've seen of his work, he tends to be like one quite spotlit light in quite a dark room. So you get what's called a vignette, which is where your circle of light just tails off, and then you get shadow coming in from the walls and things like that. So I think you tend to see that with his shots. He tends to shoot on quite a wide lens. Going back to Tanya Burr, I would say that she's shooting quite mid, so she could even be on a nifty 50, you never know. She's on something like a full frame camera. And we'll just briefly talk a little bit more about those sensor sizes, because it is something that I wanted to talk about earlier, and I did mention it a little bit. We've got two DSLRs here. You got your 5D and your 60D, which is the little baby brother of the 5D. Your main difference in sensor size here is that your 5D is going to have a really big sensor, so it's capturing a lot of light. It gives you more out of your lenses, so if you've got a wide lens, it's going to be really wide on a big sensor like a 5D. It does mean that there are some lenses you can't use, so earlier I talked about Rokinon and Samyang as an alternative to Canon primes. They do an 8mm fisheye. Obviously the Canon one we demonstrated today is 15mm. 8mm is really wide, it's super wide, but you can't use it on something with a full frame sensor because it's so wide it's going to show off the black around the sensor. It's perfect for a crop because you're just going to get the middle portion of that lens. So on this kind of camera, and you know, Nikon's of a similar type, also, you know, if you're on something like a Sony A7S, something mirrorless but with a smaller sensor like this, you're going to find that you've got more length out of your lenses, but you're not going to have as wide a shot. So for example, if we had this 24-105 on this camera, you're getting a 24mm field of view. You put that onto a smaller sensor, it punches in, so you got 1.6 times that. So your 24 is going to be closer to a 30mm on this. You're not going to get quite as wide a shot. As a result of that, you're also not going to get as much light into the camera. Okay. So you do have to up your light a little bit, add your extra gain on the smaller sensor cameras, and you also find they're not so good at depth of field because you really need a big sensor to demonstrate that pixel depth. So you'll still get depth of field, and especially if you're using a long lens, if you're going to use something like this camera, just take it further away from you. It's got that pop-out screen that we mentioned before. It flips out, which is really good if you're just a solo vlogger. You want something on a tripod that you can leave there and monitor as you record. So, but if you want to have that depth of field, put on a longer lens and take it further back. You can get the same shot size, just your walking zoom, as we call it in the film industry. Just walk further away and you'll get the same shot with a prime lens. So that's the key differences with sensor size, and it is something I wanted to talk about in this cinematography masterclass, because I think choosing the right camera for the job is a really huge part of cinematography. It's if you're a one camera person, that's fine, and a lot of us do. We got the one camera, we shoot on that all the time. But if you haven't bought your camera yet, think about what you're going to be mostly shooting. We've got this little handy cam here. That is it actually does have this manual focus ring, which is really cool, because a lot of those handy cams, they just set the focus for you, a bit like an iPhone. But if you're choosing something like that, not going to have the same amount of depth. It is going to have a slightly smaller sensor, so it won't be quite as light sensitive as something like a full frame DSLR. But it's going to be great for stuff like documentary. It's going to be great if you want to hand hold it. I mean, the problem with these big sensors, you got a lot of depth of field. If you're out there and you're trying to film people walking, moving, then you're going to have a really hard time keeping it in focus. So these are really beautiful cameras if you are a solo vlogger, if you do have control over your environment, if you're making short films and you've got a big team around you, they're great for that. But if it's just you at home, you might want to think about something like this, even a GoPro, as we talked about before. Should we talk about another example?
Yeah, so I think the last look we were trying to recreate is a more artistic look.
Yeah, okay.
So they are the Bing Radio.
Okay, yes. So Bing Radio, his style is very presently, and I really wanted to talk about him because we demonstrated that fisheye with our actor. Now, I have a feeling that he uses a fisheye lens. You notice when he's presenting, it's quite a wide space. He's kind of framed in a mid-shot, so I would suggest he's quite close to the camera. But you see his lights and shot, which I think is really cool. It is more of an artistic choice. Normally when you're lighting a frame, you don't want people to see your lights. The artistry is in hiding what you've done to make the shot so beautiful. But in his shots, he tends to have an LED in the background when he's doing his pieces to camera, and he's got this kind of soft look when he stretches out his hands, which is kind of, in cinematography, we call it aberration. I don't think you really need to know that term, but you can look it up later. Aberration. It's like when a lens just it fronds off into color spectrum. So, for example, with these Canon lenses, if you look directly at them under a light source, you're going to see that there's sort of pinks and greens in the glass. Obviously, all glass reflects light differently, and that's what you get with aberration. When you've got slightly soft, out of focus lens, particularly if you've got an old lens and the focus is sort of starting to shift inside of it, you get these strange effects. And some people really love that. So you can get plastic lenses, you can get toy lenses. Definitely, as a cinematographer, don't be afraid to play with your lenses. You can buy really cheap lenses secondhand. I've got a lot of Russian lenses for my cameras, and they were about £20. I got them at an auction. You can just get them adjusted. You can very easily get cheap mounts for them. They might not have that same tack sharpness, so if you are shooting specifically for something like a vlog, something like Tanya Burr, I wouldn't suggest using those kinds of lenses for that. But if you're wanting to do an artistic look like Bing Radio, you're going to want to do something that's more, open to experimentation. Get those Lomo lenses, get those Russian lenses, get the plastic lenses, and just play around with it. It's like you can do a lot of things. I mean, I've seen people, I'll talk about this, but I don't necessarily know if you should do it. But there's I'll tell you why, because the sensors of these cameras are very sensitive. So when I change lens over there, I always shut down the camera first, because it just covers up the mirror inside. That can get dirty really easily. So you want to get them professionally cleaned and cared for. You're going to invest, whatever it is, it's still an investment in your camera. Whatever you're spending, you want to take care of it. So just things like that are really good hints. Turning the camera off, protecting that mirror, not getting excess dust in there. And when I get mine cleaned, I get them cleaned professionally. I don't do it myself, because I did once, and when I took it to be professionally cleaned, the guy said, I can see your finger marks on your sensor, don't ever do that again. So you do want to be careful with stuff like that. But what I was going to say with these sensors is there is a technique, and I will demonstrate it very briefly, called lens whacking. Now, we're talking about artistic styles of cinematography. This is really going out there now. So if you're shooting outside, this particularly works in the golden hour that we talked about a bit earlier, and we definitely talked about last week. Basically, you're going to take your body cap off your camera. You're going to roll holding the lens in front but not actually attached, and you're just going to get light leaks spilling in everywhere, and that's something that normally people would try and achieve in post. You can buy light leak effects. It doesn't look the same though. It's a really cool technique. It takes a while to master because if you've not got that lens attached, your camera isn't engaged. It can't help you out with the focus. You can't just zoom in and be like, now it's sharp. It's, you know, that's a really advanced technique. But if you're interested in, you know, looking at the ways that lenses and your lens choices can change your shot, you know, feel free to try it. It's certainly a little bit dangerous, but it's definitely worth doing. And so long as you are careful with your cameras, you're going to be okay. Don't do it when it's raining outside. You don't want to get water inside the bodies. These cameras, particularly the smaller ones, they're not so weather sealed. The bigger ones like the 5D3, they are pretty sturdy bodies. You still want to take care of it, but they can take a bit of a knock. These ones, they're a little bit less weather sealed. You get them wet and you're going to probably know about it. So you definitely want to take care of your lenses in that way. And I think as a cinematographer, it's really important that you know that and that you know how to properly care for your kit. One thing that I would just say in terms of lens care is if you're traveling, I know a lot of you guys like to travel and vlog about your adventures abroad. You might sometimes put on a lens first thing in the morning, it's all fogged over, it's not going to work. If you're taking your lenses between extremes of temperature, straight off a plane where it's been in that really cold environment, out into the hot desert, it's just going to fog up straight away. So things like that, you know, that's another way that your lens can sort of start to just get moisture trapped inside. It can start to just affect the quality. So, like I said before, you've invested in your kit, you've invested time in learning about cinematography, just take care of it. So if you're traveling a lot and that's happening to you, don't take them out the bag until they're fully adjusted. If you're shooting in an air-conditioned environment while you're abroad, keep them in that room overnight, just let them adjust. And then your lenses are going to reward you with a very long life. I mean, the Russian lenses that I've got, they're about 50 years old and they still work really well.
Okay, it's a nice vintage piece. Well, it's fantastic. I mean, thinking that, you know, we a few years ago we were using our webcams to, you know, like shoot our videos on.
Yeah, but I mean, I would say, you know,
right now.
Some people still are, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. You know, cinematography, it's not just about light, it's not just about camera choice. Like we've talked about framing today, we've talked about the different ways that you can, you know, change the practical lights that you have in your house. You know, in a way, a GoPro is very similar to a webcam. Although it's designed for action, it doesn't have a lot of actual manual control. You can't really set your aperture on there to get your wide depth of field. You know, you can't really control your exposure on there. So if you think of it like a webcam, then there are other ways that you need to be creative with it. So things like framing. I mean, you know, we all sometimes use Skype or FaceTime, and that is just a different way that you can be creative. I've seen loads of people do really creative things with those kind of like live webcam situations. It's all about just testing things out. There aren't really rights or wrongs with this stuff. There are rules, like the rule of thirds with your framing, and also the 3 is the magic number lighting triangle. But there's ways in which you can break it, and people do all the time, and those people are the most creative in many ways. So just don't be afraid to experiment. I mean, you know, lenses are kind of the biggest way in which you're going to affect your cinematography choices. We've talked a little bit about primes and why, in my opinion, primes are slightly better quality than zooms, but they're not good for everyone, and they're not great for every application. If you're shooting a live event and you do a lot of that kind of thing, you don't want to be stuck on a prime, believe me, because it's going to be difficult to focus, and also you're going to be running back and forth to get your shot. If you invest in one zoom and then one something like a nifty 50, you're covered for almost every eventuality, and you can try out the different styles that are going to suit you. It's all about really finding yourself as a camera operator and what style you like, and then developing from there. And I think that that's what this is about. It's all about you guys learning the techniques that can give you your own style and just taking it to the next level.
That's fantastic. And because you mentioned video conferencing, something I advise my creators as well is to use Google Plus Hangouts to kind of interact with their fans and their audience and get, you know, because there I don't think it's so much about quality of production. It's more about, you know, like the immediacy of talking to your fans and interacting with them. And I think it's it's a brilliant way to engage with your fans.
And for that, like I said, if you're trying to engage with people, if you're creating that kind of live hangout situation, just try and have a little bit of an eye light. Just keep your eyes looking fresh and bright and engaging, and it gives you kind of like a celebrity look. You never see celebrities on TV. You never see them with dull eyes. There's always an eye light. It's the most important thing. Even if you're on location, I've done documentary filming. You could be on location in the middle of a forest somewhere. You've got a top light on your camera. Then if you come across somebody you want to interview, you're just going to be able to pick them out from the forest. You're going to give them that nice eye light. You're going to create engaging content. So it's little ways in which you can try and make that extra effort to make your footage stand out from somebody else's. And even, like I said, with the Google Hangout, you can do that. If you've got your laptop there and you're speaking direct there, just set up a little LED. There's no reason why you can't. You get a little GoPro, something like the GoPro stand there.
Oh,
yeah.
This one.
You get GoPro, there's a few different terms for them. You can get these tripods. They're like this, but they've got 3 legs. And they just bend. You can like put them around poles and hang your cameras up wherever you want. But you attach a little light to that, even a handheld torch, something really low power like that torch we've got there. It's just going to give you that little bit of eye light. And if it's too strong, ND filter, diffusion filter, there's loads of ways that you can bring that strength down if you don't have control over your camera. Just control the light sources instead, play around with it, keep being creative, and that's the goal of cinematography, is to just create creative, engaging content in any way that you can.
That's fantastic. And on that note, next week we're going to get even more creative some. The session will be named production on a shoestring.
Yeah, that's right. So next week is really it's the summation of this series, and also it's kind of the most important if you're really looking at like beginning that investment path, or if you've already made a few choices in terms of kit, but you really want to improve on that. Next week I'm just going to talk about all the ways, kind of recapping the sessions that we've had so far, really, that you can get good sound, good lighting. I'll probably talk about alternatives to tripods. Alternative to grip. I mean, we talked a little bit today about using a prime lens with a lot of deep focus and struggling to keep it in focus if it's handheld. But there's things that you can do. You can get shoulder mounts. You can build your own. There's very cheap shoulder mounts out there. We'll mention a lot of things in next week's session, that if you're really looking to get into filmmaking and you don't want to invest a lot of money, but you are prepared to invest the time, then there's a lot of ways that next week's session is going to give you a heads up on that. So I'm really looking forward to it. I hope that you've learned a lot about cinematography from this masterclass.
I have.
I mean, I'm glad that you're learning too, Marco. But yeah, no, I just really would encourage you to keep engaging with the series. If this is the first one you've seen, do go back, watch the other ones. If you have any questions, please just get in the comments, ask them. I'm going to be answering questions, and I just really want your feedback. And in terms of your homework assignment this week, it's going to be similar to last week. I really want you to try and play with your different perspectives. So like we did with our actor earlier, we've got shooting from below, giving them that domineering position in the frame, seeing how that affects how the audience sees someone, and then trying the other, getting down low, getting high, getting nice and big framing, moving close. If you don't have a zoom, if you've just got something like a nifty 50, move close, move further away, see what you can get. Also have a look at things like your max focal length. I'll just briefly touch on that. So for example, this 85, it's a long lens. It's going to give you a nice portrait style image, but it doesn't have the ability to focus that close to something. So if I had it on a camera and I was trying to focus on my hand here, I wouldn't be able to. So learn that about your lenses. Learn what application you can use them for. Realistically, you're only going to be able to get that close if you're either very wide, something like that fisheye lens, or if you've got a macro lens, which we talked about in the last episode. So yeah, I mean, just learn your kit and try something creative, and send me links to your stuff. I really want to see it. And thank you again for tuning in and watching this lesson. I hope you guys are all going to come back to learn about production on a shoestring next week.
And by the way, the extra incentive for watching the entire series, so the 4 different episodes, is if you watch the 4 sessions, and at the end you're gonna receive a questionnaire, like a quick test with few questions for you to answer. If you get the answers right, you're gonna receive a letter of completion from YouTube, certifying that you basically completed the whole masterclasses. And also you might get a chance to talk to one of our YouTube experts and get a personalized consultation to help you improve even further, the quality of your videos and your channel. So, well, thank you, Michelle, for today's session, and we'll see you back again live from the YouTube stream here in London next Thursday for our last session on production on a shoestring.
Yep.
If you're watching from GMT time zone, we're going to be live at 6 p.m. If you're watching from Central European time, we're going to see you at 7 p.m. Thank you so much for watching,
guys.
and see you next week. Bye.
Bye.